itakuwa ngumu kuendea hizi family planning zingine juu they are very expensive.
Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuat. It's Monday, June 5th. This is Africa 54. Clashes between Sudan's warring parties escalate in the capital Khartoum following the expiration of a fragile ceasefire deal that had brought some respite from a weeks-long conflict. A news organization in Nigeria is redefining inclusivity with a mobile news app for disabled, where an estimated 25 million citizens live with various forms of disabilities and often feel marginalized. And the United States and China point fingers at each other as their top military leaders accuse one another of ratcheting up tensions in the Taiwan Strait. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin in Sudan, where shelling hit western areas of the capital Khartoum on Monday morning after rival military factions fought through the night, according to residents. There were reports of deepening lawlessness in Khartoum and in the western region of Darfur. The fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and rival rapid support forces has persisted despite repeated ceasefire agreements. The latest agreement, which expired on Saturday evening, was signed in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on May 20th between representatives of the two sides for 7 days of humanitarian assistance. Momen Al-Maki, a journalist based in Sudan, said on Sunday that Khartoum still witnessed violent clashes between the two rival military factions, with both sides using heavy weapons.
Here in Khartoum, it is still dire. No day passes without clashes between the rapid support forces and the Sudanese armed forces. Maybe minutes before this live, we were listening to heavy sounds of shelling coming from Karari camp, which is located not far from where I am, about 10 kilometers to the north. Also, other locations here in capital Khartoum are witnessing heavy clashes between the RSF and the SAF, especially Western Khartoum, South Khartoum, and also Eastern Khartoum. The army right now is using its warplanes and also heavy artillery in order to strike and target the RSF headquarters, which are spread in Khartoum city. The RSF, on the other hand, are using heavy weapons and anti-craft shells.
Clashes also intensified in the western region of Darfur, where at least 40 civilians were killed. The United States and the United Nations want the warring sides in Sudan's conflict to agree to a civilian-led government and will continue to put pressure on them towards that goal. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, spoke to Hedy Adams, host of VOA Straight Talk Africa, about the role of the UN after Sudan's military ruler called for the UN's envoy to that country to be replaced.
I want to move to the conflict in Sudan. That country's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has asked the UN to replace its special envoy to that country, Volker Perthes. What does this mean for US and UN efforts to help bring an end to the conflict in Sudan? I mean, what influence, what diplomatic tools do the UN and the US now have at their disposal to help bring an end to the conflict?
Well, as you know, we have been actively engaged since day one in trying to find a solution. The U.S. government, working with the Saudi government, has held a number of meetings in Jeddah that got the two sides to agree to a ceasefire to allow for humanitarian assistance is still a work in progress. And as the U.S. and Saudi Arabia continue to work on this, we are very supportive of those efforts here at the United Nations. We have had a number of meetings in the Security Council on the situation in Sudan. We support the African Union and IGAD efforts, these regional efforts, and we will keep putting pressure on the two sides to move toward a ceasefire that will allow for a civilian-run government. And that is something that I think has support across the board, both on the continent of Africa, but also here at the United Nations.
Ma'am, where things stand at the moment towards that that peace that you speak about, do you feel hopeful at the moment, or are you concerned about how much or how little progress is being made?
You know, I am concerned. I am concerned that the fighting continues. I'm concerned with the number of civilians who have died. Humanitarian workers have been killed. Tens of thousands of people have left Sudan because of this fighting. So I have to be concerned until the fighting ends, until the two parties come to an agreement to allow for the peaceful process that was already taking place to resume, where there will be a civilian-run government. The military can't win this on the battlefield. The people of Sudan spoke over a year ago that they want a civilian-run government. So we have to keep the pressure on. We have to increase the pressure until there is a credible ceasefire and a credible way forward.
That was the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, speaking to Heidi Adams, host of VOA's Straight Talk Africa discussion program. Vote counting is ongoing in Guinea-Bissau following parliamentary elections on Sunday. Voters sought some stability more than a year after President Umaru Sissoco Embalo dissolved parliament over accusations of corruption. The West African country of nearly 2 million people has seen frequent political turmoil, with at least 10 coups or attempted coups since it gained independence from Portugal in 1974. Sparring for seats in Sunday's polls were more than 20 political parties and coalitions, including the former ruling PAIGC party and its rival Madem G15. At stake is Embalo's attempt to change the constitution. The results are expected on Tuesday. For more on Guinea-Bissau's elections, here's VOA's Alvaro Andrade with more from Bissau.
Election day in Guinea-Bissau was smooth and transparent. National and international observers gave a positive note to the electoral process, which according to them was free and transparent. In the polling station I visited, everything was peaceful. Political leaders said that everything went well. I spoke with the head of ECOWAS Commission, the former president of Cabo Verde, Jorge Carlos Fonseca, and he said that the process was free and calm. However, all international observers will present their reports tomorrow. The election committee will announce the results on Wednesday. The two main political parties, Pai Terra, which won the election in 2019, and Madem, the second major party, are confident of victory, but none of them claim victory. The President Umaru Sissoco Embalo said that everyone must respect the results. The new parliament will have 102 members, and the political party with the most votes will be invited by the president to lead the new government. From Bissau to VOA, Alvaro Andrade.
At least 16 people have died in the deadliest unrest in Senegal in decades, triggered by a prison sentence handed down to opposition leader Ousmane Sonko that could rule him out of presidential elections in February. Last week, a court in Dakar said Sonko was guilty of corrupting the youth. Sonko has denied any wrongdoing. Here in Washington, dozens of Senegalese staged protests on Sunday in front of the White House in a gathering called Peace and Justice in Senegal, calling on U.S. authorities to intervene in favor of a resolution of the crisis in Senegal following the sentencing to 2 years in prison of opposition politician Ousmane Sonko.
We have never seen such level of injustice done to the people. That's the reason why we come here to cry out to the world so that they can step up, they can step in and do something about what's.
Sonko's supporters say the charges were politically motivated and have taken to the streets in their thousands, hurling rocks at security forces, setting cars and buildings on fire, and ransacking supermarkets and gas stations. Armed men killed 30 people in weekend raids on 6 villages in Nigeria's north, a region often riddled by criminal violence and clashes between communities, according to the Sokoto police spokesman. However, residents from 2 of the affected villages said 36 people were killed in the attacks, which they said were reprisals for their refusal to pay protection money to the bandits. An estimated 25 million Nigerian citizens are living with various forms of disabilities. In 2019, Nigeria enacted a disability law to promote inclusivity, but rights groups say the law doesn't have the status quo and many people still feel marginalized. One Nigerian newspaper has created a way to reach more visually impaired Nigerians. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
When Eleonora Boyer gets to work every morning, she browses her phone for news stories. But with a visual impairment, she relies on voice commands to call up websites, and oftentimes she encounters difficulties.
I cannot access some websites or some applications with my screen reader, and which makes getting information very difficult.
Boyer's vision started deteriorating after birth, and she was later diagnosed with glaucoma. Some 25 million Nigerians are estimated to be living with disabilities and constitute one of the poorest segments of the population. Too often, they say, they are marginalized. But in May, a Nigerian online newspaper, The Cable, launched what it calls a Disability Inclusive News Application, or DINA, to give people with visual impairments access to information through a built-in talkback function. Boyer says the app has been helpful.
When I downloaded it and went through it, it was really good. It was accessible for me. My screen reader could use it. And also, I saw that some of the prints were very bold, which is also accessible for, persons who are visually impaired but not totally blind.
DINA is considered Nigeria's first disability-friendly news application and was selected as one of the winners of the Google News Innovation Challenge in 2022. Kolakbo Olakboju is an editor at The Cable.
We fight for persons with disabilities as media stakeholders. We do so through our reports, through some of the advocacies that we do. However, we also forget that we have to actually provide solutions for them. And we move past the era of traditional media. We are in the era of digital media.
Stephen Idoko, a program manager at the Abuja-based non-profit Inclusive Friends Association, says the news app should also help people who are deaf and need captions.
This kind of innovation shouldn't just be limited to the blind. We should also try to factor other cluster of disabilities into play. It is important that alternative images are provided in such publications online for the deaf.
Nigerian authorities signed the disability bill into law in 2019 after many years of advocacy and protest by disability rights groups. But critics in Nigeria say the law has yet to be properly implemented. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, the United States and China accuse one another of ratcheting up tensions in the Taiwan Strait. We'll be right back.
health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in Welcome back to Africa 54. A reminder, you're watching Africa 54 live from our headquarters here in Washington, D.C. Now, in other news, Libyan leaders are slated to meet in Morocco on Monday to finalize a deal on new electoral laws. But any agreement they announce on voting rules or a new interim government is likely to trigger opposition that may further delay the political process. House of Representatives head Aguila Saleh and High State Council head Khaled al-Mishri would likely present any deal as a major breakthrough after months of paralysis. UN envoy Abdoulaye Bathily says there could be national elections by the end of the year if a deal is reached this month. More than 3 million people in Cameroon are facing acute food insecurity, up from 2.8 million in 2022. According to authorities. Experts say the figures indicate a continuing trend in recent years, a concerning situation blamed on declining agricultural yields, climate change, and internal conflict, triggering massive population displacements. Tourism in Zambia is on the rebound after suffering major losses during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a survey by the Ministry of Tourism. The ministry found that the sector operated at only 15% capacity, resulting in millions of dollars in lost revenue and in hundreds of jobs. The study said the lifting of travel restrictions has brought a 70% increase in visitors in the country's tourism capital, Livingstone. Wildlife officials in South Africa are dealing with a new problem, the trafficking of succulent plants that don't need much watering. Many types of succulents in South Africa's semi-arid Karoo region are now critically endangered because of a sharp rise in illegal harvesting for international markets, with China being the main destination. Kate Bartlett reports from the Little Karoo, South Africa.
This nature reserve is part of the succulent Karoo biome, a globally recognized biodiversity hotspot that stretches from Namibia into South Africa's Western Cape Province. Many of the rare plant species that grow here are found nowhere else on Earth. Over the past 4 years, South African succulents have become part of a rampant illegal trade.
In our experience, the levels of poaching that we're seeing now is unprecedented.
The uptick in succulent poaching has led the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to update the number of the plants on its red list of threatened species.
These plants are being pushed to the verge of extinction, and those plants won't return by themselves, not in our lifetime anyways.
We've never seen this volume of plants that's been harvested from the wild, and some of these plants are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and so we're losing, thousands of years of plant growth.
Succulent poaching is often run by the same criminal syndicates involved in endangered wildlife trafficking, according to WWF South Africa, which is coordinating efforts to combat the poaching. Some 242,000 succulents were seized by law enforcement last year alone. Botanists are trying to save the confiscated endangered plants. Experts say trafficking skyrocketed during the pandemic, with people shut up at home and influencers who dubbed themselves plant moms and dads, posting videos on social media about their houseplants, sparking a trend.
I think we're getting into the age of having plants in our houses, and we want something cute and something easy growing, something that's not going to die. Succulents are very resilient.
Most of the poached plants are intended for the Chinese market, according to officials from Cape Nature, a South African government body. Many of the illegal succulents are sent overseas through the mail, disguised as food items or even children's toys. They then put up for sale on platforms like China's WeChat. While the international syndicates are making large profits, the impoverished locals doing the poaching get paid little.
The succulent karoo is a very vast, very arid landscape, and there are very limited economic opportunities.
Adrian Robertson is a farmer trying to convince others not to cooperate with the syndicates.
I'm trying to chat to the farm workers because that's what the guys are using. They're using local guys who know the areas really well.
The conservationists can only hope all their efforts will pay off, because if these plants, a huge food source for pollinators, were to disappear, it would be devastating for the entire karoo ecosystem. Kate Bartlett for VOA News, the Little Karoo, South Africa.
The United States and China spent the weekend in Singapore pointing fingers at each other. The two countries' top military leaders accused one another of ratcheting up tensions in the Taiwan Strait at separate speeches in a summit meant to highlight unity. As VOA's Arash Basadi reports, the heightened rhetoric follows increasingly tense training maneuvers in the region.
First, there was a Chinese fighter jet performing an in-air maneuver over the South China Sea late last month, rocking a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft in a move the United States called unnecessarily aggressive. Then, a few days later, in the Taiwan Strait, which separates Taiwan from continental Asia, a Chinese destroyer performed a maneuver bringing it close to a U.S. warship. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin called the move irresponsible, and the U.S. Navy called it unsafe. And thus, the stage was set for a war of words between the United States and China at this year's Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. The meeting is an annual gathering of the world's military brass and is a platform for networking and embracing de-escalation. Instead, both countries' military leaders exchanged barbs over recent events in the South China Sea.
The People's Republic of China continues to conduct an alarming number of risky intercepts of U.S. and allied aircraft flying lawfully in international airspace. We will support our allies and partners as they defend themselves against coercion and bullying. To be clear, we do not seek conflict or confrontation.
To truly avoid these incidents, the best way is for countries, especially naval vessels and fighter jets of countries, not to take closing actions around other countries' territorial sea and airspace. To put it your way, mind your own business and take good care of your own people.
Lee had refused Austin's requests to meet at the summit. While China's defense minister essentially told the U.S. to pack up and go home, it was China earlier this year that sailed a spy balloon across the United States and Canada, gathering information on, among other things, U.S. military sites. Lawmakers say China has gone too far.
You get this sort of sense of permissiveness that I think the administration needs to step up and make clear that China has identified itself as an adversary and we're going to treat it as such.
Beijing has for years pushed back on the United States' support of Taiwan, taking public offense at U.S. lawmakers welcoming the island's leaders, like House Speaker Kevin McCarthy recently did in California. The U.S. Department of State calls Taiwan a key partner in the region. China views the self-governing island as a renegade province. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
We want to thank our Africa 54 viewers around the world for joining us live Monday to Friday and also on our digital platform at voanews.com. And that's our show for today. Be sure to join us again on Africa 54 and watch us on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Right now, a storm of crises has pushed millions across the Horn of Africa to the brink. A long, protracted drought has exacerbated acute food insecurity. Recent flash floods have wiped out entire homes and livelihoods. And conflict in neighboring countries has also had a devastating impact on vulnerable populations. In a world abundant with food, entire communities should never starve to death. Never. I'm proud to announce that the United States will provide nearly $524 million in additional assistance to respond to dire humanitarian needs in the Horn of Africa. It is within our power to prevent imminent famine, to treat women and children for malnutrition, to provide access to food, water, sanitation, hygiene services, health care to the most vulnerable, and meet other essential needs.